This is going to be an epic report. Get your popcorn ready. The Bank of Canada is telling Canadians to accept a lower standard of living today. We're going to get into it. And Philippe Champagne says his generational budget is going to focus on DEI, pride, and woke investments never seen before on this planet. Rainbow will be this government's prime objective in this budget. Leaked image of Donald Trump and Mark Carney. You're not going to want to miss this one. Doug Ford's ad. Was it made by China? And a Richmond man that owned his property for 51 years now has Aboriginal title. He went to the bank to renew his mortgage and they turned it down. And now a new Aboriginal tribe is going after more property. This one's in Quebec. The dominoes are starting to fall. Let's get into this insane report. Let's start things off with the Bank of Canada's interest rate announcement. Then we're going to take a look at the Bank of Canada telling Canadians that we're going to have to accept a lower standard of living.
Today, the bank lowered the policy interest rate a further 25 basis points, bringing it to 2.25%. This was our second straight cut and reflects ongoing weakness in the economy and contained inflationary pressures.
He just said contained inflationary pressures. Let's take a look at contained inflationary pressures. The inflation rate in Canada went from 1.7% in July, and it's all the way up to 2.4% in September. And people forget that the removal of the carbon tax removed 0.6% to inflation for a 12-month period. When that runs out, the 0.6% is going to be added to the inflation rate. So if we're still at 2.4, we're going to be at 3% inflation. And the trend is not our friend here, going from 1.7 to 2.4. We could easily be above 3% and then add the 0.6%. I got one more little bit before I show you the lower standard of living for Canadians.
First, U.S. tariffs and trade uncertainty have weakened the Canadian economy. We expect very modest growth through the rest of the year, with some pickup in 2026. Second, while this weakness is restraining price increases, the trade conflict is also adding costs for many businesses, putting upward pressure on inflation. We expect these opposing forces to roughly offset, keeping inflation close to the 2% target.
Do you actually believe that they completely offset? That is imaginary.
And third, to support the economy through this period of adjustment, we have lowered our policy rate by 50 basis points over the last two meetings and by 100 basis points since the start of the year.
And for all the people out there that were hoping for lower mortgage rates because the Bank of Canada cut interest rates, only the people on variable will be taking advantage, because take a look at all of the bond yields across Canada. This is for fixed term mortgages. They have straight up skyrocketed today after the Bank of Canada interest rate announcement. Why would all of this skyrocket? It's because the market is looking at the Bank of Canada and saying inflation is not under control. The loonie today is flat, but I will be paying attention to the loonie moving forwards. Let's see if it holds 71 cents. Now, the Bank of Canada says Canadians need to accept a lower standard of living.
And unfortunately, what that means is that unless something else changes, our incomes will be lower than they otherwise would have been. They'll grow, but they'll grow along a low. This was the old path. Now there's a new path, which is below the old path. There are things the country can do to try to bend that curve up, but those aren't things monetary policy can do. These are more structural changes. I mean, fundamentally, as the senior deputy governor has hammered many times, we need to get our productivity growth up. And if we can do that as a country, we can bend that curve up. So, I mean, I think what's most concerning is that unless we change some other things, our standard of living as a country, Canadians, is going to be lower than it otherwise would have been.
Our standard of living is going to be lower because of what? It's because of our liberal government. All they do is spend. We have a generational budget that's probably going to surpass $100 billion. That is surely not going to help our standard of living. And all that our government needs to do is get out of the way, remove all the 9 bad bills, allow us to be prosperous again using our natural resources, remove the tanker ban, remove the oil and gas emissions cap, remove Bill C-69. Just allow us to prosper, liberals. Unfortunately, they don't want that to happen. And the country that emits the second most on planet Earth has fully rejected Mark Carney's plan.
Change now for decades upon decades upon decades. And the worry in terms of change, simply put, hasn't shifted. It has not reached the majority of Americans. What are we talking about? Greatly worried about. You go all the way back to 1989, it was 35%. 2000, 40%. 2020, 46%. And in 2025, look at that. It's 40%, the same number as we had 25 years ago back in 2000, and then only just 5 points higher than we had back in 1989. Really, we've just seen consistency on this issue. The bottom line is that the change message that folks who, of course, believe that change is real and is quite worrisome, simply put, has not really worked with the American people.
So greatly worried. You say greatly worried. I mean, so people say they're greatly worried, 40%, but how worried, really? Is it the biggest thing they're worried about?
Yeah, it is not anywhere close to being the biggest thing that people are worried about. What are we talking about here? Well, why don't we just talk about top issue facing the U.S. change? Well, I got some numbers for you on the screen right here. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know that these numbers are not particularly high. Top issue facing the United States change. It was 3% in 2021, 2% in average of polls in 2023, and this year the average of polls, 2. It is very, very low on the list of priorities. I was trying to count it out in the Gallup poll, and basically it was so low down, I was counting all the different issues, I almost lost track. It was like 15th or 20th. It was just very, very low down. So the bottom line is not only are we seeing that the number has not really moved over the last 36 years, but in terms of being the top issue, it simply put has not broken through. There are just a ton of things that rank way higher on the list of importance.
Even I can count to 2. In terms of how people feel it will impact them directly, what are you saying?
Yeah, I'll just note 2 things. Number 1, your Harvard education paying off. But number 2 right here, look at this. Climate change effect on my home area will be harder to stay here. Look, in 2023, it was 23%. Look at where we are now, 17%. Now, these numbers are pretty comparable, but they're pretty comparable on the low side is what we're talking about here, is Americans simply put just don't think it will have the type of impact that will really change their lives, which again goes back to the message that Bill Gates was saying, right? This is not something that's going to be devastating for humanity. It's something we can work our way out of. A lot of Americans agree, and even on this, we're talking about just 27% of Democrats who believe that change effect in my home area, it will be harder to stay here. So even on the left wing where you'd expect the change message to hit most home, it simply put is not reaching that type of level in terms of the doomsday scenario that Bill Gates is talking about.
Yeah, and just for reference, this is the woke CNN. They are left-leaning, and they're presenting this. This is mind-blasting. The entire thing for Mark Carney is crumbling before our very eyes. Mark Carney's probably hiding in a corner right now. Donald Trump just published, we just won the war on this change hoax. Bill Gates finally admitted that he was completely wrong on the issue. It took courage to do so, and for that, we are all grateful. Mega. Mark Carney's generational budget with green subsidies just bursted into flames. Now that we got this breaking news, we don't have to do any of this foreign aid for this issue anymore. This is $1 billion right here. What are they going to come up with next to justify this type of giveaway? I have a theory. Who wants to bet that Donald Trump offered Mark Carney a deal? We heard he offered him a deal. There was only 2 weeks until the whole thing was done. The deal included end the dairy cartel in Canada, scrap the anti-energy laws now, let Canada prosper, But Mark Carney said no, because his net zero fantasy would implode and his Brookfield buddies would lose billions. So instead, he approved an attack ad on the United States president, all to blow up the deal. Prove me wrong. British Columbia only has 2 refineries, one in Prince George and the other one in Burnaby, BC. We just found out that Burnaby, BC's oil refinery to fall under U.S. control in a $9.1 billion deal. How is this even possible? So you're telling me, and there's 55,000 barrels of gasoline that comes to the Lower Mainland. Basically, 80% of the gas that we use in the Lower Mainland comes from this refinery. If it goes to U.S. hands, we are cooked in British Columbia. We have 0 refining capacity. They're going to crank up the price on BC residents. How is this even possible? Justin Trudeau used to do these ridiculous videos of him running to show off to everybody. And guess who just copied Justin Trudeau? Our Prime Minister is trying to be Justin Trudeau. How pathetic is that? This is just a reminder of all the Liberal slogans. Elbows up, time to build. Canada strong, build Canada strong. Spend less, invest more. One Canadian economy, generational investments. Canada's new government, the strongest economy in the G7. Canada has what the world wants. The best possible deal for Canadians. We could give ourselves far more than the Americans could ever take away. We've heard all these empty, useless slogans from Carney and his government long enough. Canadians deserve better. Thank you, Ryan Garrickson, and happy birthday on X. He turned 50 today. Thank you for reminding us of this failure of a Liberal government. Philippe Champagne today says Canada's generational budget is going to focus on DEI, pride, and woke investments never seen before on planet Earth. The rainbow will be this government's prime objective with this budget.
2025 will include generational investments designed to grow our economy and build a stronger Canada and even a stronger Canadians. Every person in our nation, regardless of their gender, regardless of their background, regardless of their identity, must be able to live free from violence and harassment and to participate fully in our country's success and in our country's future. The sad reality, is that we're still seeing incidents of gender-based violence in our country, as well as rising hate and violence targeting 2S LGBTQ+I communities, are a stark reminder that equality and safety, I insist equality and safety, must continue to be defended. That's why in Budget 2025, we'll provide sustained funding to advance equality and inclusion across Canada. This serious long-term commitment will ensure constant progress towards equality and safety for women, for girls, and for 2S LGBTQI+ people. And I think for that, we should all be proud today. This is a moment in our nation's history.
And they're also going to be sending millions, probably billions, for gender rights in Vietnam. A leaked photo has surfaced on the internet of Donald Trump cheersing, guess who? Mark Carney. Was he cheersing an additional 10% against Canada? What exactly was he cheering in this photo that has surfaced on the internet? I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. What do you think was happening in this photo? There's rumors that Mark Carney's going to sign a massive deal with China, which includes Canada immediately removing the tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. It looks like we're going to be getting some of those $10,000 EVs. I wonder if Donald Trump's going to get upset about this. Mark Carney's dirty laundry got dragged into the House of Commons today, with Michael Barrett exposing Mark Carney's conflicts of interest with Brookfield, a firm that dodged $6.5 billion worth of taxes. He is now under committee investigation. Will this end Carney's political career?
Revelations at the Ethics Committee have exposed the Prime Minister's company, Brookfield, as one of Canada's largest tax dodgers. Leading tax transparency experts show that Brookfield avoided an incredible $6.5 billion in Canadian taxes through the use of offshore tax havens over just 5 years. Now, while chair of Brookfield, the Prime Minister set up 3 multi-billion-dollar investment funds in Bermuda and the Cayman Islands, shielding profits from Canadian taxes. And these are funds that could line the Prime Minister's pockets through future bonus payments. Canadians deserve to know that the Prime Minister is making decisions in the public interest, not his own financial interest. That's why it was shocking that Liberals voted to try to shut down this investigation to improve transparency for Canadians. While Liberals vote to protect powerful politicians, Conservatives will stand up for hardworking Canadian taxpayers. We will not back down. We will defend hardworking Canadian taxpayers, and we're going to hold this Liberal Prime Minister accountable.
Isn't it unbelievable that the Liberals actually voted down for transparency? Well, I'm not surprised at all, but unbelievable. So now that Mark Carney is going to be under scrutiny in an ethics committee review for his conflicts of interest, I highly recommend you send to your MP the Moose chart. That's right. Moose on the Loose has been spending his entire life this year on creating the Moose chart. He is doing incredible investigative journalism, and I'd like to see his Moose chart brought to this committee. And the Moose chart has absolutely all of Mark Carney's conflicts of interest and ties and everything. If this chart gets brought to this committee, Mark Carney will not only fall as a prime minister, there could be potentially more for him. If you want to find this chart, you go to moosechart.com. He's done so much work on this. He has 2 areas I want to point out. He has support me on the channel. If you don't have the financial means, obviously don't do that. But if you do, you could support him here as well as leave a tip. If you have a tip, you could be anonymous. Leave him a tip. We need to take down this Liberal government. Now this is going to blow your mind. Doug Ford's video is here. China created this video in April. I'm going to press play and you tell me what you think.
Someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports. It looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. The triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs.
All right, I'm going to stop. It's identical. So are you telling me that China created the ad that went viral in the United States and Doug Ford is bragging about billions of views? If this becomes public information, well, Doug Ford, you have a lot of explaining to do, and so does Mark Carney, because he knew about the ad. So the real question becomes, who is running Canada right now? Because if we destroy our relationship with the United States, by default, we would increase trade with China. Interesting enough, this is what Ronald Reagan said.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own.
So which one would you prefer, Canada? Here's Doug Ford confirming that Mark Carney was with him when he approved the ad.
Particular ad before you moved ahead with airing it.
I was with him.
He was with him.
Everyone's obsessed. Just think of that.
Yeah, he was with him. So Mark Carney looked at him and said, move forwards with the ad, Doug Ford. We need to destroy this relationship ASAP. China is calling. Who's ready to get their mind blown even further? Mark Carney wants a trade war with the United States. Here's Senator Kennedy.
Here's my point. I don't want to be at war with Canada. I don't want to have a trade war with Canada. I want us to continue to be friends. I made this suggestion to the new Prime Minister of Canada the other day, Prime Minister Carney. I'm going to make it again. And I hope this time he'll take it more seriously. Remember, if you want to be taken seriously, you have to act seriously. If you want respect, you have to act respectfully. Prime Minister Carney, you say that President Trump is not a fair trader. And I understand your point of view. I don't agree with you, but I understand your point of view. You've got to stand up for your people. If Prime Minister Carney, if you believe in free trade, then here's what you do. Make this offer today. Offer to go to zero tariffs in Canada on American goods. No tariffs. None. Zero. Zilch. Nada. And challenge America to remove all of our tariffs on Canada. So the people of Canada can sell their goods to Americans without a tariff, and the people of America can sell their goods to our friends in Canada without a tariff. Zero tariffs. Let Canadian businesses and American businesses compete. Competition makes all of us better. That's one of the shared values that we have with our friends in Canada. Let American businesses and Canadian businesses go at it in a friendly, competitive way, and may the best price and the best product win. That's fair trade. That's free trade. And if Prime Minister Carney, if he wants fair trade and free trade, he will make that offer. And I don't speak for President Trump, but I'll certainly encourage President Trump to accept that offer, and I think he will. There's a way to stop this trade war. It's just to remove the tariffs on both sides. Remember what Mama Gump said? Stupid is as stupid does. Let's don't be stupid. Let's don't have a trade war. Let's continue to be friends. Let's get rid of these tariffs. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
What do you think, Canada? If Mark Carney actually showed up to Donald Trump and said, we will remove all tariffs, we're also going to remove the 9 bad anti-energy laws and bills. The dairy cartel, gone. Donald Trump, you have free access to Canada's economy. And in turn, Donald Trump would be cornered because he would have to accept that deal. And everybody wins. Mark Carney wins. Canada wins. The U.S. wins. Every single person would win. We would have like the biggest boom in our economy in Canadian history. But will Mark Carney do that? Well, he hasn't done it. He's just blown up our negotiations with the United States. Wake up, Canada. Oh, and by the way, we would win in so many different ways. For example, we have the oil, we have the critical minerals, we have the water. We actually have the cold air for the AI centers. We have abundant energy to power the AI centers. We have the forest. They can't duplicate any of this stuff. We would straight up win. Today, the Bank of Canada said that we need to accept a lower standard of living. Remember when Mark Carney vowed to make Canada's economy stronger than the United States? This article is from February 18th. I'm ready to make Canada the strongest economy in the G7. He ran on saying Canada will be the fastest and even stronger than the United States. Well, today, we're worse than we've ever been. Things are heating up in the city of Richmond, where the Aboriginals have taken over land. This guy owns a blueberry farm. He's lived there for 50 years. Check this out.
Do you have a mortgage on your property here in Richmond?
I do.
Have you spoken to your lender?
I have.
And what have they told you?
They are not renewing it.
Wow.
Holy crap. How is this even possible? They've taken over title. So you had fee simple title. And now the First Nations have claimed the land. The Supreme Court has said, yes, this is First Nations land, and now the lender's not going to be renewing his mortgage. Who's going to pay for this guy's land? I just wonder what's going to happen here. And now, because of the situation in BC, a First Nations files a lawsuit demanding Aboriginal title over lands in Western Quebec. The dominoes have started to fall. All of the properties across Canada now are in jeopardy of falling to the First Nations. Out of any party across Canada, the only party that's actually fighting for your property rights is the One BC party, Dallas Brody. She's the only one that is brave enough to take on the beast that we call the Liberal NDP Canada.
You will own nothing and be happy. That is the true mantra of this government. In 2019, the property rights of British Columbians were quietly surrendered with the passage of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, also known as DRIPA. DRIPA was a Trojan horse. It turned what appeared to be a harmless and well-meaning United Nations aspiration into binding law. What few realized at the time was that DRIPA mandated the voluntary transfer of property and democratic authority from citizens to unelected and unaccountable tribal chiefs. It was under DRIPA that the Attorney General, now the Premier, instructed provincial lawyers in the Cowichan case not to use their strongest legal argument, namely that Aboriginal title had been extinguished. That was a specific written directive. Mr. Speaker, we can defend property rights or we can defend DRIPA, but we cannot do both. This bill, the Property Rights Protection Act, repeals DRIPA in its entirety and restores to the province its exclusive jurisdiction over property and civil rights. This bill declares that the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples has no legal force or effect. This bill directs public officials to defend the property rights of British Columbians to the full extent permitted by law. This bill requires meaningful consultation with property owners before any government decisions can impact their property rights. This bill stands for the simple principle that what you own in British Columbia belongs to you, not to the government and not to its friends. It is upon this solid foundation that we pledge to rebuild this province, beginning with this magnificent bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Absolutely amazing. The only party that's actually fighting for your property rights. So I'm not going to put you through this, but the NDP voted no, meaning this is what happened.
The motion is defeated.
Unbelievable. So the NDP, they don't care about your property rights in British Columbia, meaning the rest of Canada as well. That's it for today's report. Like I said, today was a popcorn-ready report. What do you think about the Bank of Canada coming out and saying we have to accept a lower standard of living unless something changes? And we all know what that change is. The Liberal Party needs to get out of the way. And the only way for that to happen, for us to get them out, by voting them out. Are we going to get a Christmas election? What do you think happened in that picture of Donald Trump cheersing Mark Carney? And what is your take on the Richmond man that's lived in his property for 51 years and now can't even get a mortgage from the bank? I'll see you on the next report.